All right, so welcome to my presentation on step-by-step AI-driven lit reviews with SciSpace. I already did some introduction, but I have the slide. So the only thing that I would add is that I am, let's say, representing, or like I founded the effortlessacademic.com, which is a platform that has been around since 2022. And we focus on teaching academics basically how to use different AI, note-taking, lit review tools. And I had so far over 15 webinars. So every other month or so, I do a webinar or a course. And yeah, my biggest philosophy is that you have to learn to use the tools well before you have many of them. So don't feel, don't run to the next shiny thing. Just stick to one thing. It's usually will be the best choice you can make. And what we are going to focus on today is basically the review process from framing a research question using SciSpace topics. So this might be relevant for, the less senior you are, because as a faculty person, you already have a very clear idea of topics and so on. But sometimes you might want to kind of pivot into a slightly different direction. Let's say you're an ecologist and now you want to do some computational ecology because that becomes really essential. So that is something where you would find these topics useful. Then we're going to dive into how to actually, break these down. We're using deep review. And we're going to organize all these insights in a notebook and basically create step by step a document that will guide us through the whole thing. And for me, it's important that we kind of dive first and build this vast understanding, or like a broad understanding of things, before we actually go into the papers. And whenever I talk to people, that's what they find the most difficult thing, is not to get overwhelmed, because it's very easy to just go online, search for your topic, and then just start saving these papers without end. That's very, very easy. But then you end up with 100 papers with no way of saying like what is important, what is not important. So my philosophy is like, be really, really frugal, like collect these papers really carefully, and AI can help you skim through these papers and understand basically what is relevant and what isn't. A really cool feature in SciSpace is that you can scan papers in bulk. That is very, very useful towards the end of your literature review, when you kind of, you get the broad concepts, the big papers that everybody knows, you understand it. But now it goes into the nitty gritty, where there's like 100 different papers that all published basically the same thing in a slightly different angle. Like, how do you get to the nectar of all these papers? And that's what the bulk scanning is for. And then there's a short outline on ethical and limitations, considerations of AI, which I think is also important to acknowledge, because especially when you're new to AI, you might think, oh, I type something and it sounds human, so it is kind of human, but you're assuming the wrong things. Something that talks like a human is far from being a human, and it will make completely childish mistake, but be very, very good at something that you couldn't even imagine it could be good at. So it's a different type of intelligence, and that's what we want to understand. So let's get started with the first thing, which will be the topics. And I mentioned already that what we want is we want to start very broadly. So keep all of that in mind when we're going to go through the live demo. We're going to focus on keywords, not papers at the beginning, because first, now here's an example. We want to see what are the effects of climate change. And for example, forests die off, tree mortality increases, which is the same, but kind of from a different angle, because forest is more than just trees. There are also bushes and ferns and so on. There is increased drought. So there are different subtopics inside of your review. That's what we're going to have without even thinking about papers. So we want to build a feeling for the field and understand the clusters and the topics that are important. And these clusters, or even, sets of clusters, they later become a paragraph in your literature review. So let's get started on that. I'll just start with ARC here. And let's close all the other ones. For those not familiar, so Arc is just a browser. It's like a Chrome browser. Don't use it anymore. It has been discontinued. So, but I'm going to start here on SciSpace, and I'm just going to close it. So this is basically where you would start if you come on the website. And here on the left side, there is the idea of finding topics, right? So let's go to find topics. And we're gonna search for climate change effects on forests. So let's see what this will bring us. So there are two different settings, standard and high quality. So I'll be using high quality. In my experience, the difference for that particular feature is not that great. So you get more or less the same topics, but you kind of get a few more topics if you're using high quality versus if you're using standard quality. So so even if you're using the free version, standard will do good. So what we have now is, first of all, at the top, we have the answer that comes from 5 topics. So these answers are completely AI generated. Now, what do we have to keep in mind with AI? It is never 100% complete. Yeah. So don't expect that what is here is everything there is to know. It is in 99% of the cases factually completely correct, but it is, I would say maybe like in 80% or let's say in 20% of the cases, there's something missing. So there's a big chance that this is not kind of the whole pie. This is a part of the pie, and you will have to go through that process multiple times. So this will basically tell you an answer, and this will bring you to the single topics that exist. So what I always focus on is these single topics, because that's what we're here for. We are about to build like a broad understanding of a topic. And what we can do is we can use this Save to Notebook button. So let's create a new notebook. And I will call this notebook our climate notebook, and I'll put it here in a folder. So a notebook is essentially just, it's just a piece of text. So this is our climate change effects on forests notebook. And what we can do is we can save things to this notebook. And what you see is it just basically copied this whole text to the notebook. And throughout the whole platform, you will have that save to notebook thing, which I think is not always super, super useful, because it just basically copy and pastes what is there. And whenever we take notes, the number one rule is not to copy and paste, because that doesn't help you remember things. So let's say we are gonna open this in full screen. So what I did here is I just opened the notebook in a separate tab, and Arc allows me to put these tabs side by side. That is a little bit better than this kind of pop out that the UI in SciSpace offers, because this cannot be closed, right? So I can just kind of, have that on the side here. And we're gonna remove this entire text for now. Just have to maybe make it a tiny bit smaller. Move the zoom window here out of the way. All right, so climate change effects on the forest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect these topics. And the first thing might be forest dieback. Then reduced forest cover. To make them a little bit bigger, you can type in 1, 2, or 3 hashtags. So this makes it into like big or less big headers. So I prefer 3 hashtags. Altered composition of forests. So if you're not an ecologist, bear with me. So these are just different topics that happen inside the forest. And what I also like to do is, because I'm just starting out on these topics, I want to mark it as something that I haven't kind of looked deeper into it yet. And I really like to use emojis for that. So on macOS, you would use the combination Control, Command, and Space to bring that emoji thing. On Windows, it's something else, but don't ask me exactly what it is, but it's also like it's a similar combination. And so what we want to do is we basically want to go through a few of these topics and just collect them for now, because there is no need in rushing also our literature review. It's always good to be thorough. And that notebook, as you might have just seen, it allows sometimes, it suggests these AI suggestion and says, okay, climate change can lead to significant habitat changes. And we just press tab. Ideally, it would accept it, but I don't know why it didn't do it yet. Let's wait for it again. See if it suggests it. Okay, accept suggestion, and maybe turn it into a paragraph. So yeah, SciSpace will always try to help you kind of defining or writing, because it treats that notebook less as a notebook and more as a kind of draft for writing, which is fine. But yeah, just keep that in mind. That's why these things kind of pop up. You can also type in hashtag and then ask AI to write, for example, define what is habitat change. And it will try to write it for you. And maybe in one sentence. Let's see if that looks better. Okay, that looks good. So yeah. So now, if you're not familiar with things, you can basically ask questions. So you don't need to go to ChatGPT and kind of try to define those things. You can just do it all exactly in here. But we can also, of course, once we have a list of these things, because this will not be, like four, this should be, 16, 20, 40, 50 topics for a whole literature review. So this will really take time to build that. But you will soon notice that there are kind of different things or different clusters of topics emerging. So for example, yeah, if we just keep kind of looking through it, we might find something like impacts on biodiversity. So yeah, how many species are in the forest that is impacted by the climate change that affects forests, and certain species will die and certain species will live. And yeah, and we can say, okay, what are the impacts of biodiversity on forests with respect to climate change, and create a new topic search. So impacts of on biodiversity, impacts of climate change on biodiversity in forests. So now we're kind of drilling deeper into our understanding. So first we had like a very narrow, like a very broad set of ideas. Now we can kind of take each of those things and expand them into more topics, more sets. So after we have done that, then I would basically continue filling that climate notebook with ideas that I find here. So here's, for example, species distribution shifts. So that is again a new topic. Yeah. So whenever the climate kind of heats up, then certain animals will migrate away, other animals will migrate in. So this will kind of shift where the distribution of this species is located, and that's what is going to happen. And it's indeed like a very, very big thing in the ecology right now, is to predict how things are going to shift. So that will be very, very important. And yeah, SciSpace is already suggesting what it means. So yeah, so that's how I basically would start doing that. And what I would like to kind of keep in mind is that each of those kind of blocks, yeah, let's say impacts on biodiversity has this, then it has like another bunch of things. So there's like one, topic 2, topic 3, topic 4, and so on. So when you're later writing a paper, yeah, so I can show you how that looks for me, for example. I have like a question: how does climate change affect forest worldwide? What is the probability? And so that becomes a paragraph in my writing. But this question here that you see in my paper, my actual paper, is exactly kind of this question that I have here, right? So all these 4 or 5 topics, these are the topics that you initially find in this idea, and then later, we find all the papers and all the right citations to actually add to the entire literature review process. So yeah, so that concludes basically the topics. Then we can move on to the next part. Yeah, so actually one small, if you want to know how I take notes, because note taking is like a really big skill, and this is the beginning, right? So you could actually create a much more nuanced note taking strategy, which will allow you to yeah, find things over time, over 5 years of your PhD, you will build this note vault, and that is something that will be incredibly useful in the future. So go to effortlessacademic.com and leave your email, and then you're part of a free 8-day digital note-taking course, to how I do it and the very basic steps. And it will really help you synthesize information, completely transformed my career. So highly, highly recommend it to get started with Obsidian note-taking. But okay, the next step is we want now to build a deeper understanding with the searches that we have. Because before that, we kind of only built this broader understanding of topics, but not really any papers, not really anything else. So here we are aiming for a deep search, and we are using the regular search for kind of more niche questions, because the main difference for me between deep searches and regular searches in SciSpace and also in other tools is just how much information they consider. So the more niche a topic, the less information is there to consider about it, and kind of the less you need the deep search. And the more you want to automate everything, the more you would want deep search to happen. And we're going to make topical notes on these different subjects. We're going to wait still with collecting papers and kind of first learn what are the important topics here. And I have picked the topic of drought. Let me just copy and paste that question. So we have one big thing here that would be drought. Yeah, so drought affects forests. Yeah, so drought affects forests, and we want to know how does drought affect forests. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here to literature review. And I'm going to paste a question, which is how has drought increased with climate change, and how does this affect forest ecosystems? There are 3 buttons: standard, high quality, and deep review. So let's go first with deep review part. Or actually, let's start with a normal high quality search. So this will just kind of look for papers. And the way that works is that each paper contains a bunch of words. Yeah, and that question also contains a bunch of words. So what AI does is it found a clever way of how to compare 2 texts, whether they are similar. So if a question is similar to a paper, you will get papers that are very, very similar to that, like relevant to that query. And that's how all of AI works, is basically on this text similarity that has been just recently cracked, how to build that. Yeah, and so what you get is you get an answer from 10 papers, and you get 10 out of 100 papers. And that's what I mean. If we run the deep search, then we get 700, 300 papers, and so on. So it's a lot more intricate. But that already can give us a really, really good kind of overview of what we should be studying. So increased drought frequency and severity, impacts on forest ecosystems, biodiversity. So again, this is kind of the boring part, but what I like to do is actually to do that by hand. Yeah, so I would say, okay, frequency of droughts is increasing as just like one note that I take on this. And that's a topical note, right? That's the note is really related to the drought. I don't really care about papers right now. None of that is relevant, So I find this advice of like find all the papers that are relevant is just wrong, because it overwhelms you a lot. And we're going to find enough papers. It's not the hardest thing to find papers. All right. So yeah, you're going to start collecting these things and add kind of additional questions also. For example, ecological transformation. That might be something that we would want to add as a new topic, because that seems like a relevant topic. And I don't know what it means, but I find kind of new keywords that I would want to add to my literature review. But here, yeah, so here maybe reduced vitality is something that I would add here. Increased loss of leaves, and so on. So you get the idea. Basically, like you get to search, and I'm going to show you how deep review makes it essentially easier. Because what deep review is going to do is going to ask you follow-up questions. Like, are you interested in specific forests, in specific ecosystems? What geographical context? For example, I am right now in New Zealand, and that's on the southern hemisphere. So southern hemisphere has quite different forests from somewhere in Russia. Yeah, and that is again very different from more arid environments like sub-Saharan Africa. So all these reactions will be different, and that's really important to actually nail them down. And as a beginner, I might not even be aware that this is a valid question. So even just because there is this question, I could ask. I could add another point that I want to review is does geographical context matter for climate change impact on forests? Yeah, so that is something that you will definitely want to answer in your literature review. But I generated this again from just kind of looking at the questions. So we can say for now, we focus on forests in New Zealand, and primarily are interested in, I don't know, forest mortality or something like that. Yeah. So I just give it an answer, and it's going to go and it's going to search for many papers, and that can take quite a while until this deep search is completed, and that is because you will have multiple papers that are going to be analyzed, and then the AI will basically decide, is that paper relevant, not relevant? Then it will kind of take from these papers, read whatever it can in depth, and kind of start creating an argument. So this is an iterative process that is very similar to what people would do when they would do it manually. But now kind of AI does it. And of course, the biggest problem is that AI is not really great at reasoning, and it's not really great at saying like what is super important and what is not important, because importance for AI is often defined by frequency. So if something often comes up, it must be important, but it's not always the case, right? And so all these tools like SciSpace that are building tools for deep review, they are challenged by creating something that can actually discern what is important and what is not. So this leads me always to this one problem, like whatever AI gives you, it is usually not false, but it might be incomplete. And so that is your task as a diligent user of AI to understand and put the trust where it's due. Yeah. So the cool thing about deep review is also that you can see which papers are analyzed, how many, and it kind of goes step by step. That's really nice. So yeah, so what you get again is you get a really lengthy reply, which is now much more nuanced than what you had before. So from that reply, I could definitely generate another 10, 15 topics. Yeah, and like don't be alarmed. Like there will be a lot of topics at the end, but that's the purpose of a good literature review, is to touch on each of these topics. And maybe it will be half a sentence in your final review, but it should be there to begin with. Yeah, so that is basically, yeah, the deep review part. And what we'll see here is at the bottom, it will tell you it used 366 papers. So that's pretty good. And what I also like to do is, because that is drought relevant and I would want to come back to that document, is I just copy and paste that link here. And I just say, okay, well, here my deep search. Oops, sorry. Let's put it as a paragraph, and then click that link button here and enter that URL, so that next time when I want to like work on that part, I can always just click that button and it will take me directly to the screen, and I can kind of continue interacting here. And then at the end, I will have many deep searches linked here, and this will become like my central document that leads me into different parts. And also, if parts of this document become too big, you can split them off and create like a different notebook for that. But yeah, so for example, like again, role of vapor pressure deficit is something that we didn't do previously, so we can add that to our collection here. And again, there's almost everywhere the possibility to add things to your notebook. So if I click that button, it will essentially copy and paste this whole thing at the bottom here, which is not always what you would want. But it might be something that you want, and you would start going through them one by one and kind of eliminate things. But yeah, I prefer to do it manually. But yeah, that's all. There's always this option to do that. there's really good understanding, the impact of geographical regions. So for example, here I could already start and say, okay, well, these are the impacts. Maybe I'll put it even here, this table, instead of drought. But that's really interesting, right? So you see that this literature is kind of slowly coming along. If you're really, really lazy, like things you can do is you can just copy and paste this whole text here, and you can just paste it here, and you can select the whole thing and say to AI, shorten it into 3 bullets. And yeah, and so the result is, yeah, it's a much, much shorter version of that. Yeah. So if you're really lazy and you really don't want to take your own notes, that's a valid possibility to kind of just copy and paste and use AI to shorten that. If you're, generating it as a something to hand out to students, for example, yeah, all that stuff already. You just kind of want it to be really quickly digested. That would be an option. So yeah, so we still have not really cared about papers so much. So we are still at the point of building a broad level understanding. And trust me, like it will save you so much time to understand at first, like what are the different parts that are relevant without going into papers. Yeah, so maybe you don't know what vapor pressure deficit is. So yeah, so you read up on this, you understand that, and now okay, well, this is a concept that is very important when it comes to understanding drought and forest and climate change. And once you understand all these concepts, on a very broad level, that's where it will be really easy to collect papers, because now you can actually understand what is important and what isn't. So you gained a possibility to filter through the papers yourself. As a beginner in that, you don't know which of these papers is kind of better or worse. Like it's okay, like everything seems relevant, yeah, and that's what people do. They just like click, 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 collect more and more and more. But more is always worse in literature review. It's about like targeting the right papers, and very often, read like 3, 4 good papers, you're done in your understanding. Yeah. The rest is just reshuffling of information. So be really, really selective and protective of this, urgency to collect papers. Okay, let's move on to the step 3 out of 4, I think. And that is now to actually collect and read the papers. And I always tell people to prioritize very recent citations from high impact journals. Why? Because it makes it very easy for you to, find new papers. Because usually high impact journals will publish stuff that has been thoroughly researched. There's in Nature, there's always 20 people, 20 authors per paper. So, there's a lot of work that went into it, and you can use that work and you can look at the papers that these papers cite, and this is your bibliography. This is where you find everything that's known on the topic. If that paper is in addition a review itself, and it is very recent, then chances are, like this is really gold, because that saves you a lot of time, because it has everything on one topic already there. And you don't need to kind of ask AI every single question, because 20 authors publishing something in Nature will always be better than AI, but AI can help you find these papers and kind of find the nuances to these single questions. But we'd always start, with somewhere in between. Yeah, we will always double check citations that AI gives us. So for example, here it says, some proposition European forests have experienced severe droughts, and gives us like 3 papers. So 99.9%, this will not be hallucinated or this will not be wrong, but it might not always be the right citation. And one example is preprints. So we can find a lot of preprints here that have not been published. So if you have a preprint that has not been peer reviewed, that has not been published, there's something wrong with it. I never cite that. So we have to really pay attention to what we are actually citing. Yeah, so as I said, few top-notch papers, and use AI to fill the details and niches out later. So AI will be better the more kind of niche we get, in my opinion. Yeah, and how do we do that? Well, for example, here we start with a deep review on the topic of the drought effects on forests, and we already have 366 papers. Yeah, and we want recent high impact papers. So in order to find them, we can, for example, filter by the last 3 years. And that's what I would usually do. And yeah, just start kind of looking through it. you will always get these hints here. Nature reviews, Earth and Environment, visual education, nature communications, annual review, and so on. So these are the different journals. So what I usually do is, if you're completely new, just go to a web page like, let me just maybe close it and yeah, let's open it here on the side. So that is just a web page where I can say, okay, what is this nature reviews, Earth and Environment, and just kind of get an idea how impactful that is. So that is, for example, an impact factor of 50, which is incredibly high, while Nature Communications, yeah, it sounds like, oh, it's also a nature journal. It is just 14. So there is a big difference between them. And if I kind of go further down here and I find, I don't know, let's say science of the total environment, that might be, that's actually also a good journal. But yeah, so this allows you to basically gauge how impactful a journal is using this journal impact factor. And that is something you only do, in the beginning when you really have no clue. But, once you're in it, you know that visual education, for example, is not a journal that publishes ecology. Like I've never heard about it, like I've never find it. So I will not consider that paper. I will not consider looking at it so closely as I would on one that is, for example, in Nature Communications. And so what you would do is, it's also global field observations. So it gives you already an idea. Is it like a review or is it more like a collection of observations, a meta review and so on? So what I do is I'll start bookmarking them and I'm going to add them to a folder called drought. So that, slowly filtering through them, like reading the insights that SciSpace gives for me here, and very, very carefully selecting just a bunch of papers. Yeah, so I did that yesterday already. So some of them are already bookmarked as drought papers, and they are usually, these high impact papers that we want. So once I've done that, I can also start and basically, cite things here. So for example, if I have that paper here, small and slow, drought tolerance of tropical tree species, I can say something like, tropical tree species react stronger or strongly to drought. And I can, put just usually the author, Guillemot, 2022, just to have it, to have an idea, okay, this is the paper. So I think that's a temporal thing. So there is a cite button here, but whenever I search for the author, I will not find it. And I think that's a temporary bug that I also submitted to the people. So I just can't find the paper, but technically, SciSpace would be able to add those citations so that you can just kind of click on them and they will be much more easy to access because they will actually be linked. But yeah, let's go into this and check out the paper itself. Yeah, so there is no replacement for actually reading the paper. Yeah, so I think a lot of the time people want to just go and say, oh my God, that is so much to read, but there's no replacement. Yes, if you want to be a scientist, you will have to read these papers, but AI can help you after you have read these papers and you have an understanding, to basically really condense something into like easier notes. So what I like to do is I like to extract 3 pieces of information that are unique findings of this study. So let's clear that chat. And that allows me later when I have to write something to say, hey, this is what has been found. And this year, that year is the study that has found this. And these are basically the things that I can write about that study, right? So of course, it presumes that I have already read and I kind of have a feeling that this is not wrong. Yeah, so you have to kind of skim at least through the things to understand that this is not wrong. But then after you have done that, you can again like save that to the notebook. Yeah, and this goes into our notebook here at the bottom. And yeah, we can maybe copy it to our drought research thing. And, maybe we want to shorten it. Maybe, maybe only two of them were relevant, but that's basically how I would want it to be, that I have some sort of topic, drought effects, and I have some sort of proposition, drought tolerances, P50 and TLP exhibit weak phylogenetic signals. So whatever that means, it doesn't matter right now. But what is important is I have a sentence that I could plug in into my literature review, and I have a citation for that sentence. And I am pretty confident that this really matches what the study has actually found. So for that, I always recommend, double check what's happening. You will get a feeling for what type of things AI can get wrong and whatnot. But 99% of the time, like, this is actually pretty on point. What you can do here, though, is you can say that the response length, you want it longer, you want the tone kind of more simple, academic or professional. So let's say, we want like kind of a longer, more professional replies, and just see what the same query will generate for us. Yeah, so compared to the previous reply, which is like 4 lines, we get almost twice as long of a reply. And yeah, this is maybe even better to understand. You can even click on these parts and it will show me inside this PDF basically where is something happening. So I find that very, very useful. I'm not a huge fan of chatting with PDFs and just generally asking things, because scientific literature has already been set up that all the summaries that you would need are there. If you want a summary of the paper, sorry, if you want the summary of the paper, you can read the abstract. Yeah, in most cases, the abstract will be better than what would be generated by AI, because it is written by humans that understand the topic better than AI. If you want to see exactly what the study did, then go to the last paragraph of the introduction, this "here we" paragraph usually. That will tell you exactly what the study did. If you want to see exactly like the summary of all the findings, then you would usually go to the first paragraph of the discussion section, and it will summarize everything that they have found. If you want to see the impact of the study, then go to the last paragraph of the discussion section, something here, broader implications. So these are the summaries that you would need. You could generate them with AI, but they are already there, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to like summarizing things. But what AI is really great for is finding specific things on specific narrow niche topic. So for example, does this study mention tropical rainforests and their sensitivity to temperature or something like that? So yeah, write something that's much more nuanced and long. And what it will do is it will basically act as a search function inside the PDF and give me parts where it speaks or doesn't speak about it. And that makes it very, very handy, not so much for reading, but for double checking. Like, is this study really helpful for a specific purpose? So, yeah, so let's go back. Yeah, and that's what we get at the end. We would get, 10, 20, 30 of these little paragraphs. And you will align them then later and combine them to get something that looks more like this. So something that you can basically start publishing. So yeah, so that's our idea. And what I like to do is, like, once I've analyzed everything and I've created all of that, then I will gift that guy like a yellow, sorry, a green emoji instead of the yellow emoji. Yeah, but you can have your own system so that you have basically an overview, which things you still need to work on and which things you're already done with. All right, so that was our collecting papers part. And then there's one more thing that's kind of also more towards the end, when you have too many papers already, and because every time you run these searches, you will maybe only collect 3 or 4 papers, but you have a dozen or so of topics, so you will end up with like 50, 60 papers. But then again, a good lit review has round about 100 references, and that's essentially what we end up with, is to have a big collections of references. So finding the needle in the haystack, yeah, bulk searches. That's what SciSpace is really, really good at. is, or AI also in general, is to use it as a search. So I just showed you how we can use that search to search one PDF. But what if we could take 100 PDFs and search for that? That's what I call kind of bulk searching. And we're going to look at that. I'm going to go to my library. That's where all my folders are, all my notes, all my PDFs, and so on. And I'm going to go and use that ELR4 collection that is from a webinar that I've been giving, just so that we don't have to collect. Maybe we can even close that guy here. So it just contains many, many, many papers. I'm going to delete that. And these papers are on range shifts. So whenever temperature changes, trees will start migrating. Yeah, that means that something that has been growing here now wants to grow over here because it's too hot for it to grow here, and it wants to grow over there. And invasive species also move around. So it's not only animals that move around, but also trees, and that's exactly what is kind of the main subject of my research. And so after collecting, in this case, it's only 24 papers, I want to bulk search all of them. And what I can do is I can create a new column, and let's call it range shifts. And I'll give it an instruction. And the instruction is, sorry, I wanted to copy and paste that from my other screen. Yes. Sorry, yes. So does this study support the statement tree range shifts are strongly driven by temperature? So that is something I call a focal statement. Yeah, so I have a proposition that these range shifts, so this movement of the ranges of the trees, are somehow influenced by rising climatic temperatures. And it may or may not support that. It may or may not be true. Like in reality, it's true for about half the plants. The other half does not follow temperature. We don't really know 100% why. But yeah, so the AI is supposed to analyze whether or not this study that I have here on the left supports that proposition or not. And it should reply with a yes, no, or partially. And again, I like to use emojis because that gives you a little bit of an understanding, like more visual person. So let's create that column. And what it's going to do is it's going to now read these papers one by one. And by the way, here I have uploaded all the PDFs manually because SciSpace might not have access to the paper, but your university does. So once you collect all these papers, you can add them to SciSpace, and you can add the PDFs, you can upload them, and then you basically would have like a good collection where the AI can operate on the entire collection, not just on like single pieces of it. So here is the result. So you can get, okay, no, no, partially, okay, interesting, no, no, no. Maybe there's like some study that supports it more rigorously, because that is a proposition that might not be, like as I said, it's not something that is actually true, but there is some sort of interesting dynamic here. For example, that paper written in 2023 does not support it. That paper written by the same author in 2020 partially supports that. So that's something where I would say, oh, how? That's actually interesting, and then maybe, there was some sort of development between 2020 and 2023 that led to rejecting that theory that range shifts are driven by temperature, right? So that allows me to find that needle in the haystack. So I think for that question and this collection, there is not a single paper where it will tell me yes, but essentially, like that's what we're looking for. We're looking for this green dot that would tell me, yes, that paper actually supports that. Or here in that case, I would read into the partially papers and like really focus on them, because that allows me to create that focal question and analyze 24 papers in bulk, basically running a search against each of them. So that's, I think, is pretty cool. For medicine, if you were be doing medicine, you could say, is this a double-blind controlled study? Yeah, like because you're only interested in those. It's not suitable for systematic reviews, but it's really, really useful for just your own review. You could ask, for example, is that study done in animals, in birds, in plants? Yeah, that's something I, as an ecologist, very often ask, because trees can change ranges, but also animals and also birds and also all the other fish. But what fish do usually does not correlate very well with what trees do, right? So that's a little bit why it's important, and we can add a column, for example, study. Sorry, whoa, region, and say what geographic region is this study made? Write one word for location or an A if not applicable. Yeah. So it's the same way I'm extracting like a very kind of niche piece of information out of many studies at once. Yeah, and then I can go ahead and, hopefully it will give me some results soon. So Eastern United States, that's already pretty clear for me that, as an ecologist, I would know that Eastern United States and like what is the difference in forests to New Zealand. And, that could give me an understanding whether or not I should read that paper or not, or if I should cite it in a specific context. All right, I don't know. I think it's yeah, being a bit slow, but okay, you get the idea. Yeah, so that is the systematic review. The other point that you can also do is you can kind of select all these papers and you can chat with these 15 papers at once. So I call this the research oracle because essentially, if you have papers that are all on one very niche topic, you can you can ask the AI to extract everything you know on that topic and answer any question that is known on that topic. For example, drivers of range shifts for trees is something I want to know. And it's going to analyze 15 files and give me a summary, basically, no relevant context. Sorry, I think I have to restart that. Yeah, so there's some sort of little hiccup. Yeah, and then there you go. You get kind of ideas. So that condenses information into like a short paragraph from many papers at once, and that extracts this needle in the haystack. So there's two ways of basically bulk analyzing papers for your literature review, which I find both extremely valuable. And then, of course, again, you go ahead and you go back to your to the notebook that we have created. So this was our climate notebook here. And you can continue adding to it as you go and as you search and create this kind of massive document. You don't have to do it here in SciSpace if you don't want to. You can do it even on a pen and paper if you're more of a haptic person. But there's the possibility to add links and so on. So it has a lot of advantages here. Just important, always have this document. All right, so let's summarize a little bit what we have learned so far. So we use topic search to create an outline for the review with broad concept, no details, most importantly, no papers, just to really understand what is important, what is not, what is the main things that I have to answer, the main questions. And we have kind of combined these topics into clusters. And these clusters later become basically paragraphs in our literature review. Then we use deep search or standard search or high quality search to find papers and to find propositions that supported or detailed some of these parts. Yeah, some of these little bullet points that we have created, the topics. And then, these expanded it into a bunch of sentences that we can then, use to write our paragraph. And then we saved recent high impact papers into a folder for bulk analysis later, to find this needle in the haystack if we're looking for it, or to build a research oracle, which is just a chat with all the papers at once, allowing us to ask very specific questions, very niche questions on that already very niche topic. And that is, of course, not like a 1, 2, 3 step. That's something that you run through multiple times. You just go in circles and loops around it, but it's always the same. You go from broad generic to searching to actually having the papers there for you. And yeah, once you have combined all that together, you have a solid literature review process that leaves you ideally with, like 30, 40 or so of these little sentences. And each sentence is tied to a link. Yeah, and that together is what creates a paragraph. So I can show you basically how that looks for me. So that is this paragraph that you see here. The paragraph has looked before I started writing it, looked like that. So it's just basically bullet points. And each of those bullet points has a citation added to it. And then, over time, using some AI and also some of my own mind, I created that paragraph that becomes the first paragraph of my introduction, which is essentially a literature review. So that makes it very easy. And you're also kind of never staring at this blank page that can be very scary because you end up with a bunch of these sentences that, if you're really lazy, just copy and paste everything and say, write me a nice paragraph using all these citations. And the AI will do like a decent first job for you that will at least, take this paralysis out of you and make it very easy to move forward. All right. So a very, very brief outline into the ethical considerations. So whenever you do this, don't upload any published manuscripts. SciSpace might not be the right tool to upload manuscripts because it's more, like published stuff, but that would be a breach of confidentiality. So don't upload anything that doesn't belong to you and that is not completely, under your control. You have to always declare what you used in the acknowledgements. So more and more publishers would tell you how they want it done. And do not, like this is from the Wiley guidelines, do not use AI for basically reasoning, producing scientific, pedagogic, or medical insights. So don't use it for reason, use it for collecting these bits of insight that are more or less uncontroversial, but use them yourself to reason, right? That is what sets you apart as human, is that creativity and that reasoning ability. So that human supervision is required. But that being said, AI actually is very good at also reasoning to a certain degree. So you can use it and you can get inspired, but just be mindful that you shouldn't just copy and paste what AI tells you. It can be very wrong. Do not use AI written text as is, especially for niches, because AI might just, take something and learn somewhere and copy and paste to you verbatim, and you end up with plagiarism accusations because you didn't copy and paste. You copy and pasted it from AI, but AI copy and pasted it from somebody else, right? So you don't want that. And then remember, AI makes mistakes. So develop an intuition for what it may get wrong. So that often is misinterpretation or overemphasis because, AI wants to please you in a way. It wants to tell you like, I want to get it. I want to really answer your question. It will tell you something that's not necessarily true. So, and last thing, acknowledging the use of AI. So in preparing of the manuscript, the author used following tools in order to, following reasons. The specific content generated by these AI technologies is clearly marked and described, a dedicated appendix to be used for editorial and review purposes. Prior to submission, the authors reviewed the content generated and takes full responsibility for the content of the submitted manuscript. So that's how Wiley suggests to do it. Like if you're publishing in some other publishing house, just look, they will probably have some sort of acknowledgement statement that they want. So just copy and paste that, tell, SciSpace for analysis, and you're good. SciSpace offers discount codes. So if you like that tool, this kind of end-to-end thing, then there are a bunch of codes that you can use. For India, Ilya 25, otherwise Ilya S20 or 45 for monthly or yearly discounts. They are valid until June 7th. So just about another week. Because I think that's pretty good discount. So the advanced tier is what you would need for deep review. And everything else is what you would need for high quality. So there's like, the standard quality that's also limited. And then pretty much everything that I've been showing you was using the high quality models. And I showed you specifically the deep review model and how that looks. And if you're interested to learn more about my lit review processes, I have, like a bunch of other processes. So SciSpace as one tool here, but there's also, like Obsidian for note taking that I often use. I use Draw.io, which is like a free diagramming tool, like obviously like a bunch of plugins into Words. So there's the AI literature review. There's note taking. How do you take notes? So I have about 500,000 of words and notes, and it's incredibly useful for me to generate new ideas. And one is on writing with AI. So how do we get, all these loose bullet points into really nice writing? SciSpace 25 is your 25% discount code. You'll find everything on effortlessacademic.com. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I hope that you enjoyed it and you get something out of it. And I would open the floor to questions.